some water.
Thank you.
I would make a final call joke, but I'm not.
No, I told him, you know what? We got to sit here and watch them drink beer. That is like the worst.
The mic is right here.
I'm going to open and throw it to Carla, and then Carla will introduce Josh, and then we'll go. Very quick. It's okay. There's okay. Everybody got their water? Everybody good? Up at 4 a.m. to go up to.
I just wanted to let you know.
It's a certain point. Yeah, I just can't
There's
see
one
this.
mic between 4 of you that got passed along. There's a woman right here. She's going to have time card carrying. You understand? There's one mic between 4 of you that can share.
We are. It's
30 seconds and a hard stop. She's representing you well.
Susie and I go way back.
Yeah.
But I bring.
That's okay. You'll develop a flow of it on.
I know, exactly. I was like, whatever you tell us, people do.
We lost again at 8. And Frederick's only like halfway to.
And it'll start alphabetically, so you'll go first. And this way. Does that make sense?
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
You're going to have 30
Good
seconds.
evening. May I have your attention?
Go first, Mr. Baker.
I'm gonna
30 seconds.
Good evening.
90 seconds for an intro.
Good evening, please. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Chuck Porcari. I'm the board chair of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. And tonight we want to welcome you to the MDLCV-EF, Maryland Sierra Club, and Maryland Matters Environmental and Public Health Forum. We really appreciate your attendance. A few quick housekeeping items. Bathrooms are over here. The bar is open. Pizzas are there. That's the important thing. And also welcome to those on Facebook watching the forum. So I'm going to turn this over to Carla Reddick, the Executive Director of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, for our introductions. Carla?
Hello, everyone. As Chuck said, I am Carla Reddick, the Executive Director of Maryland League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. We are so excited that you are all here tonight. I will admit that this was a change in venue, and when we were planning the event, we actually were worried that there would be too few people here, and that did not turn out to be the case. And one of the reasons that we know that that is because voters are fired up. They want to know where the candidates stand on the environment and public health, and you are all here tonight to show that the candidates really need to explain where they are on these issues, and there's a ton of interest in this, and we are thankful to each and every one of you. And thanks to everyone here at home. We're streaming this live on Facebook Live, and so it's not just you in this room that are going to be talking to the candidates about these issues. It's people at home. There was so much interest, and we really thank you. So thanks for bearing with us. As Chuck said, we are hosting this with our co-sponsors, Sierra Club Maryland Chapter and Maryland Matters. This has been a labor, sometimes of love, sometimes not, but we are so happy to have you all here. I just want to thank the host committee that put this together, including Josh Tolton from Sierra Club, David Smedek from Sierra Club, Gary from Sierra Club. He really helped put this together. Danielle Lipinski, Karen Dory, Kristen Harbison on my staff. We also have Ben Alexandro and Joanna Vicente, all really putting in a ton of effort, as well as Josh Kurtz, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. Without too much, Josh is going to talked about the format of the event. We wanted to really make sure that we got really good questions. Not every candidate is going to get the same question, and Josh will explain that. But we really also want to thank the candidates for being here. This is amazing that we have this event. We also wanted to have it in a venue like this, specifically because we wanted it to be more low-key. We wanted you to have access to the candidates, access to their staff. They all got plenty of staff, so you can talk to people about where they stand. So we wanted to build in time beforehand and afterwards to really talk to this, the candidates and their staff about where they are. So please take advantage of this venue. And really, thanks to Peabody Heights Brewery for hosting us. This is incredible. Josh Tolkien from Sierra Club is going to close up the evening, but right now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Josh Kurtz from Maryland Matters.
Greetings, candidates. Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Carla. Thanks for coming out. This is a fantastic venue, though it's so cold we'd probably be just as happy with hot toddies or something instead of beer, but the beer works. So, yeah, a few things you should know. Well, first of all, 10 seconds of shameless self-promotion. If you don't know what Maryland Matters is, it's a fairly new website, nonprofit website, news website dedicated to Maryland government and politics. Check it out online, marylandmatters.org. These guys all read it.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, so as Chuck mentioned, the restrooms are through the plastic curtains there. Don't forget to tip your bartender, very important. So here are a few ground rules. You'll note there are 8 candidates up here. The organizers invited every filed candidate for governor, so you can sort of draw your own conclusions about who's not here. And so we have 7 Democrats and 1 Green Party candidate. The candidates are each going to get a 90 seconds to introduce themselves. We'll do that in alphabetical order, so we'll start this way. And then we'll ask questions. These questions come from you. When people signed up for this event, we asked them if they had questions for the candidates, and that's where we've called the list. So these are your questions. We may have tweaked them a little bit, but they're your questions. So, which is to say, there won't be an opportunity to ask further questions, but you can corner these folks when it's over. The timekeeper is there, candidates. She'll be giving you some warnings. As Carla mentioned, we're not asking, the candidates are not going to get to answer every question. We're going to split it up a little bit. The organizers have come up with some weird numerology that I don't quite understand. But in some cases, there will be 3 candidates will get to answer a question. In some cases, 2 will. In some cases, 1 will. We have some very broad categories. But I think it'll work out. I think we'll all learn stuff. I think it'll be fun. Remember to tip your bartender. I'm going to sit down and shut up and turn it over to Rushern Baker first.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this event here and giving us the chance. Thank you. As Josh said, I'm Rushern Baker. I'm currently the county executive of Prince George's County. I'm thrilled to come here and talk about what we've been doing in the county around the environment and what I want to do as governor. One of the things I'm most proud about is that we have the only Department of the Environment in the state. We made it a priority. We lead the state in recycling and waste reduction. And so I look forward to telling you about, my experience not only as a legislator for 8 years, as county executive for 8 years, but as someone who's worked in the private sector around redevelopment and smart growth. And those are the things that we made a hallmark of the county, and I want to make a hallmark of the state. One of the things I will say is that we think Baltimore City could be the place where we actually lead environmental green jobs, and investing in old manufacturers here to lead in some of the things. I see that my time is going. I look forward to talking to each of you. It has been great being here, and if somebody can sneak me a beer, I really appreciate it. God bless you.
Hi, I'm Ben Jealous. If you want to make Donald Trump's blood pressure go up, send a civil rights leader to be your next governor. I've been in this green movement my whole life, since I was a young kid in a Earth First t-shirt at an anti-clear-cutting rally. Teenager founding the first high school chapter of SEEK, the Student Environmental Action Coalition. Working for the PIRGs when I was in my early 20s. Working as an investigative reporter exposing the poisoning of rural areas in Mississippi. And as president, the youngest president in the history of the NAACP, I launched our climate action program. I've been endorsed by 350 Action, Friends of the Earth Action, Bill McKibben, Phil Radford, because they know my heart, they know my history, and they know my ability to get big things done. I'm in this because we need a state leader who will make sure we get to being 100% reliant on clean and renewable energy as quickly as possible. And we need a leader who knows how to pull people together, to pull together the governors of this region to make sure that we protect our bay, even if Pruitt has his way and kills funding for it. I'm here to get Maryland back to doing big things again, and with your help, we will do just that. Thank you, and God bless.
Hi, folks. I'm Kevin Kamenetz. We need a governor. Our next governor needs not just to be able to talk the talk, but walk the walk. As Baltimore County Executive, we've been leaders in land preservation, where 2/3 of our county is zoned rural in nature, and 90% of our population lives on 30% of the land. We've been leaders in environmental protection. We spend $26 million a year rebuilding eroding stream banks, planting trees, and using street sweepers to stop runoff into the Chesapeake Bay. And we've been leaders in renewable energy. We're negotiating to put solar panels on our closed landfills and rooftops to generate 21 megawatts of solar power. As governor, we're going to save the Bay again. And that means doubling the oyster population. It means fighting big chicken. It means making sure that we implement laws that ban styrofoam and plastic bags. And importantly, to incentivize companies to make investments in wind and solar. I'm running with Valerie Irvin, Montgomery County Councilwoman. We're a great team. We have a great track record, and we have a great vision. Let's get things done again in Maryland. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rich Madalino. I have the honor of being a state senator. I am very proud of my 93% lifetime score from the League of Conservation Voters, and I'm one of only 2 people on the stage who has a score, because I'm one of only 2 people up here who has actually, as a legislator, been dealing with the issues that you find important. On banning fracking, my name is on that bill. On moving the RPS to 25%, my name is on that bill. Fighting to bring it up to 50%, moving it to 100%. Those fights have been my fight and your fight. Together, we have made progress because I know how to get things done in Annapolis, because I've been doing it for the people of Montgomery County, the people of Maryland. I've been doing it on education, on healthcare, and on the environment. And if you want to get things done in Maryland, you need someone who has the skills, the experience, and the relationships with the people that you have to govern with. And that's who I am. I am so proud to be joined in this race by LaWanda Jenkins, a former cabinet secretary in the O'Malley administration, 17 years of senior executive service in the executive branch, 16 years of legislative experience together. We are the most dynamic and the most experienced team that has ever sought one of these offices. And if you elect LaWanda and myself, we will make real progress on the environment for the people of the state of Maryland. Thank you so much, and I look very much forward to answering all of Josh's questions, which I've had the chance to do for years. So, and he's a good questioner.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alec Ross, and first of all, welcome to the neighborhood. I lived down the street for 14 years here in the Oakenshaw neighborhood. I'm a former Baltimore City public school teacher, married to a Baltimore City public school teacher with 3 kids here in the city schools. And, you know, since then I spent 12 years working at nonprofit organizations. I ran technology policy for Barack Obama's presidential campaign and served in his administration for a good long while. And what I'm trying to do is bring a new face and some new ideas into Maryland's politics. I have a depth of executive branch experience, having had a couple thousand employees and a couple $100 million worth of budget serving in the Obama administration. And what I think we need in Maryland, in a state where the average age of a state legislator is 65, and nationally it's 37, we need to bring some giddy up. We need to bring some new faces and new ideas. My running mate, Julie Verratti, owns a craft brewery with her wife, one down in Silver Spring, and she, like me, is a new face with new ideas who also has a depth of executive branch experience. She served in the Obama administration, ran women's entrepreneurship at the SBA and the Boots to Business program for returning combat veterans. So we're outsiders in that we didn't come through the Annapolis farm system, but we have a depth of executive branch experience, progressive values, and business sense. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jim Shea, and with Brandon Scott running for governor and lieutenant governor. I'm so happy to be here tonight because the issues you care about are so important. I'm not a career politician, but I've spent a lot of time getting things done in the state of Maryland. I've led large organizations, both private and public. One of them was the University System of Maryland, where I was lucky to support research, environmental research throughout the system, and particularly at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. I was also chair of the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, a coalition that advocated for mass transit to relieve our congestion, our traffic congestion. I was chair of the empowerment zones for 10 years, where one of our goals were public health in neighborhoods in East Baltimore and West Baltimore. My family has always treasured Maryland's natural resources. My wife, Barbara, who's here this evening, is a lead environmentalist. She is the founding chair of Casey Trees, whose mission is to restore, protect, and enhance the tree canopy in Washington, D.C. She's also past chair of the Irvine Nature Center and of the Friends of the National Arboretum. Barbara and I want to protect the environment for our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ian Schlackman, and before I really get started, I just want to take a minute to say I'm a proud member of the Sierra Club. I'm actually the Greater Baltimore Group's vice chair. I'm not speaking on behalf of the club at all tonight, but I want to take a minute to acknowledge all the amazing work we do, not just in the Sierra Club, but all the environmental organizations statewide. I'm here tonight with my running mate, Reverend Annie Chambers, right down here. We are the Green Party candidate for governor. We will be on the ballot this November. So no matter what, you will have a chance to vote your values. Literally vote green. You know, all the way out to Western Maryland to right here in Baltimore City, there are incinerators that are choking communities. But some of them are considered green energy by our state standards. We've got overflowing raw sewage into the Inner Harbor here in Baltimore. We've got chicken feces, frankly, exploding into our bay, creating enormous dead zones. Environmental racism is rampant, not just here in Baltimore City, but statewide. Like you, I fought so hard this last legislative session. Why? Because I knew there were important bills that needed to get passed. But so many of them died. And it wasn't because Governor Hogan vetoed them. It was because a Democrat let them die in committee. It's time to fight the establishment with every tool we got. Vote Ian Schlackman and Reverend Annie Chambers this November. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Krish Vignaraja. I was 9 months old when my family fled a civil war and came to America. They had no jobs, just $200 in their pockets, and 2 very young kids in their arms. They built a life here in Maryland that made my life possible. Both of them were actually Baltimore City public school teachers. And I had the honor of a lifetime to go from Woodlawn High to the White House because of the opportunities that Maryland gave me. I served as Michelle Obama's policy director at the White House, where I had the honor to work on issues ranging from how to get more of our children to go to urban parks, the Pollinator Partnership Action Plan, but also served as senior advisor to Secretary Clinton and Secretary Kerry, where I had the honor to see true firsthand leadership when it came to the Copenhagen and Paris summits. And I have the real honor of being Donald Trump's worst nightmare. So if you really want to see someone's blood boil for a president to turn from orange to red, elect someone who has been called Donald Trump's worst nightmare. But I will tell you that every Democrat will tell you that they love the environment. I am the only candidate on this stage who loves the environment so much that I married the head of the National Wildlife Federation. In fact, the only reason I married that man right there is the environment. And so I have the unfair advantage. I have the unfair advantage literally every day of hearing Colin talk about the world we will give our children. That legacy is our most important inheritance, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Okay. So we'll get to the questions now, and the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer these questions. This comes in the broad topic of energy, and we're asking this first of Mr. Schlackman, then of Mr. Jealous, then of Ms. Vignaraja. So these 3 will have a crack at this question. And this has to do with fracking. And as has been mentioned, fracking was banned in Maryland last year, but frack gas infrastructure is still expanding in the state, especially in western and southern Maryland. There's even a proposed gas pipeline that would cut through the length of the Eastern Shore. So what is your position on the construction of new gas infrastructure, including pipelines, compressor stations, power plants, and export terminals in the state of Maryland? So, Mr. Schlackman, you can begin.
This is such a timely question. Just the other day, I was actually out at the Maryland Department of the Environment, and I was actually joined, I'll give her credit, Krish was also there as well. And we were fighting a very, very important cause, Cove Point. Yeah. Cove Point is a massive LNG natural gas export facility. And it's not just an export facility, it's also a compressor, it's also got incredible amounts of infrastructure, including massive LNG pipelines all throughout the area. And it's ridiculously close to a residential neighborhood, just totally unsafe. Now, I really want to make a larger point about this, which is that we kind of have a bit of a schizophrenic policy when it comes to fracking in this state at this point. Because on the one hand, we're talking about, we banned it. I mean, Governor Hogan did ban it. On the other hand, we have this massive amount of infrastructure being built in the state. In fact, Governor Hogan himself said he was willing to spend up to $100 million of infrastructure in this state. That is appalling. I can tell you the other day I was out in Hagerstown, Maryland. We went out to Washington County for a drive, and I said, oh yeah, this is where they're building the Potomac Pipeline. And I said, who's for this in this area? They said, no one's for it. Conservatives, liberals, Green, Democrat, Republican, we're all against this. Nobody wants this in their backyard. Nobody wants to pollute the environment. Nobody wants to watch their land value go down. And on top of this, to see the extent of the degradation of the environment all throughout the state that's being caused by this fracking. In Pennsylvania, there was a man yesterday who literally showed us the frack gas water with diesel fumes in his water coming out of his tap. We can't support this anywhere. We can't support this in Maryland at all. We have to be crystal clear about the way we stand on fracking in this state. And I think it's very important to know that well, I'll stop right there. I'll give it to him later.
All right. Mr. Jealous.
Yes. I fought Keystone XL, fought Pipeline Standing Rock. I've lost at least one endorsement in this campaign because I made it clear that as governor, I will not support any new gas infrastructure. We will be clear, there's aging infrastructure. There's methane being leaked by old pipes in the ground. We need to dig them up. We need to replace them. But my running mate, Susie Turnbull, and I are climate hawks, and we're proud of it. Now, Cove Point, totally opposed. Charles County, totally opposed. Pipeline, Western Maryland, the one they want to build under the Potomac, totally opposed. The new one they want to build down the Eastern Shore, totally opposed. You know, since I was out there with Keystone XL, helping to fire folks up before they surrounded the White House, sending Julian Bond down to get locked up, the last protest Julian Bond got locked up for was opposing Keystone XL. You know, we've seen that TransCanada, the company that builds it, things leak all the time. We cannot risk the Potomac. We cannot risk the estuaries on the Eastern Shore. And when I'm governor, we will move as quickly as possible to being 100% reliant on clean and renewable energy, because it's the right thing for the environment, and because it's going to help us create jobs, including in places like Baltimore. This is a time for courage, and I hope everybody up here will commit that the next governor of this state, no matter who it is, as long as it's one of us, will not build any new gas infrastructure.
Before we turn it over to Ms. Vignaraja, I have to quickly ask, if you're live streaming, please don't, because we've got an official live stream going, and apparently there's some signal problems, and so if you don't mind not live streaming, that would be most helpful. So I apologize, Ms. Vignaraja.
You would think this is my full-time job, because when we had the Potomac Pipeline rally, I was there. On Monday in Cove Point, I was there. When we had the rally against MDE yesterday, I was there. So that is my position on trying to grow the infrastructure when it comes to fracking. That is the old way we produce energy. And so what I'm going to do are 4 things. First, I'm going to make sure that we actually employ the basic standards we have in place. Risk assessments and environmental impact statements. We are not going to make exceptions for special interests. Second, I'm going to make sure that instead of turning the other way as toxic air pollution floods the communities that are around, for example, Cove Point, you have 40,000 more Marylanders who are in that area. We in the world would never have a facility within 1.5 miles of our neighbors. Third, I'm going to make sure that we reverse the increases of air pollution limits which Governor Hogan allowed. But fourth, I'm going to recognize that true leadership is not addressing this as a state issue. Because the truth is, it is fantastic that we ban fracking. And this is where we've got to hold Governor Hogan accountable to what I call his election year epiphanies. After being for fracking, he realized it wasn't politically expedient. So all of a sudden, he reversed course. It's the same way that after 3 years of doing nothing in Baltimore, literally forgetting Baltimore on a map, all of a sudden he's back here talking about truth in sentencing. These election year epiphanies are going to come back to bite him big. But part of what we need to do is make sure that we actually show regional leadership. What does that mean? We've got to make sure that fracking doesn't take place outside of Maryland as well, which means that my first action will be signing out to Orsenco, which is a leadership of 8 states that Maryland is not a part of. If we want to make sure that fracking doesn't happen outside of our state so the pipelines come through Maryland, we've got to make sure that we don't lead the charge just as Marylanders, but in the region as well. I will do that as governor.
Just as a very fast follow-up, can I ask by a show of hands, is everyone committed to opposing more infrastructure for frack gas here on this panel? Okay, just thought it was worth asking. The next question will be for, in order, Mr. Shea, then Mr. Kamenetz, then Mr. Baker. This has to do with coal plants. Maryland still has 7 large coal plants, most of which are over half a century old. These 7 coal plants alone accounted for nearly 1/5 of our state's climate pollution in 2014. Do you support ending the use of coal to generate electricity in Maryland? And if so, how do you propose ensuring a just transition for workers and communities reliant on this industry into a new economy? And if not, what justification do you have for continued use of fossil fuels? So, Mr. Shea.
Thank you. These coal plants need to go. Perhaps not overnight, but soon. We need to adhere to the admirable goal, which I'm sorry that the General Assembly didn't see fit to pass, of 50% renewable energy by 2030. We need to live in the 21st century, and we need our children and grandchildren to live throughout this century and into the next century. And it's not going to happen if we have coal plants churning out our energy. We need the green, sustainable energy to be produced. As governor, I will create the incentives to enable that to happen. It's not going to happen overnight or without those incentives. We need to know how to store the energy once it's gotten from the sun and the wind, and we need the technology to be able to do that. Let me turn to the second part of the question, which is what happens to the people in the coal industry? What do we do for them? Innovation is everywhere in our economy, and that's a good thing in many respects. But it's a very bad thing if you lose your job because of innovation, or in this case, the advancement of society. That's a social cost that we need to cover. And part of my public education plan is to make sure vocational training is not only available to people in high school and community college and younger people coming into jobs, but also for people who've been displaced from their jobs. We need retraining. We need the ability for somebody who's 45, 50, 55, dare I say 60, who still wants to work, to be able to get the skills, educated for the skills that match the jobs of today. So we're going to have to do that too. Thank you.
Mr. Kamenetz.
So I want to go back more than 20 years ago. Southern Maryland was the epicenter of tobacco farming. And this state, and our tobacco was supposedly of the highest quality and the finest tobacco around. And our state courageously made a decision that we wanted to not promote tobacco farming because we wanted to promote, obviously, anti-smoking legislation. And part of that was to avoid the hypocrisy of telling people not to smoke when people's lives depended upon growing tobacco. And we created financial incentives to wean our farmers in Southern Maryland off of tobacco and into cleaner crops. We can do the same thing with coal. So obviously one incentive from one end of the carrot and stick approach is that we can assess tax based upon carbon production. But we can use those funds to help promote renewable energy sources. And that's to transition folks from funding from coal and dirty to clean. You know, it's interesting, there's so many opportunities with clean energy. At Sparrows Point, where we used to have Bethlehem Steel, we are now having an opportunity for port-related activity, but one of the contracts that we're working on is with U.S. Wind. They are going to build the wind turbines at Sparrows Point and then barge it down the Chesapeake to Ocean City, where we hope that this will take place and get installed. But it just shows that we can figure out ways to create jobs and clean our environment at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that. One of the things that we've talked about in the platform that I've laid out is making Baltimore City the center of renewable energy. Wind, solar, actually taking some of the manufacturing here that's been forgotten and turning those into areas where we can train people in this new area. Yes, we're going to have to retrain people because we've got to get away from coal. But there's an opportunity, and it can be done, and done in places that we didn't think it could happen. In the county, we actually put together in our stormwater management, we actually went to communities that didn't know anything about the green. In fact, when they thought of the green economy, it was green paint. But many of those small, local, women-owned businesses are now part of a $75 million industry that's creating a new Prince George's County and helping us to lead. That's what we have to do around the state. But you have to have the political courage to do it. As was said earlier, a lot of the legislation that we see blocked, and Rich is right, there are two of us up here who've actually served in the legislature and know what it's like and how hard it is to get legislation passed. But you also have to be the executive that's willing to go out there and put it on the line. Because we did that, and we have the experience in Prince George's County, we can do that statewide, but the governor has to lead on it. If he doesn't, or she doesn't, then it's not going to get done. What I promise you as governor, I will lead on this. We will make Baltimore City the renewable energy capital of the world as we go to 100% clean energy. Thank you.
All right, this next question is for first Senator Madaleno, then Mr. Ross. In the environmental community, there are constant conversations and debate on the best way to deploy clean energy in Maryland and the region. Proposed solutions include purchasing mandates, renewable energy portfolio standards, and carbon pricing. What we can all agree on is that we need more of it, and we need more of it quickly. So what do you think is the best way to achieve more clean energy for Maryland and to get us on the path to 100% clean energy?
So I think we start by moving forward and fast with the renewable portfolio standard. But this is one of the challenges of the renewable portfolio standard. Currently, the renewable energy that is part of the renewable portfolio standard is not clean, right? We are burning trash. We are burning woody biomass. We have to get the dirty part out of the renewable energy portfolio, and then we've got to move it, and then we've got to move it up, and we have to find a way to bring those facilities and those jobs to our state and not just have it be, you know, we're paying for some reason for new facilities to open in Michigan or Pennsylvania or far away. We've got to create the jobs and we've got to create the industry here and bring that home. So I think the easiest path, the smart path, is to start with the renewable portfolio standard. We know with the changing in the transportation market that obviously we're going to start moving away, thankfully, from gas to more electric vehicles. When that happens, we have to move our structure away from gas taxes to carbon taxes. We need to have that conversation starting now about how we tax carbon and where it's going to go to and how you put it in a fair and progressive manner. And look, I'm the vice chair of the Budget and Taxation Committee. Ask some of the people who have been here, who have worked in Annapolis on these issues. This is my forte. If you want to get these things done, you need someone with the experience who's been there, who's worked on these issues, who's sat down. When the Renewable Portfolio Standard died a few years ago, was part of the team that sat down and said, let's create the Clean Energy Jobs Act. Let's make it not just about the renewable portfolio, about more jobs here. And we got that bill through, and then when Larry Hogan vetoed it, we got that bill overridden, and it's now law in the state of Maryland.
I love Maryland, but one thing I don't like about Maryland is that I think we sometimes think we're a little bit more progressive than we actually are. You know, our rhetoric is not as good as our reality. And I think it's time for us, you know, a lot of the times in these Democratic forums, you know, we'll bash Republicans, and we should. But I want us to hold a mirror up among progressives, among Democrats, and say, can't we be better and hold ourselves to account? Now, we lack the infrastructure in this state, the capacity in this state to get to where we need to be in terms of clean energy production. Right now, whether we will admit it or not, we are an Exelon state. We are a BGE Washington Gas state. So the question is, yeah, we can tinker around with things in Annapolis like we've been doing for 10, 20, 30 years, and we'll make a little bit of progress here and a little bit of progress there. But at the end of the day, the bills will kind of suck because there will be compromises. And, you know, it's just like the 1998 Water Quality Assurance Act. It's like all this. It's like when we banned neonics, but we said, oh, yeah, well, you can have neonics if you're on farms and for industrial use. We aren't as progressive as we think we are. So what do I want to do? I want to create a green bank, a $1 billion green bank, so we can create the financing mechanisms in the state of Maryland so that we can really deliver energy without going hat in hand to Exelon or going to BGE. Little old Connecticut did this, 13,000 jobs it produced. New York's done this, Massachusetts has done this. Our rhetoric is high and mighty, but our reality is less so. Let's bring a $1 billion green bank to Maryland to build the infrastructure to really deliver clean energy in this state.
Thank you. We're going to talk about water a little bit and water-related issues. And the first question we'll ask first of Mr. Jealous and then Mr. Schlackman. How do you propose to work with leaders in states whose runoff contributes to pollution in the Chesapeake Bay, especially those whose regulatory framework is weaker than ours? What measures do you propose that would protect Maryland waters given the weakening of the Clean Water Act at the national level? Mr. Jealous.
You know, I live on an estuary on the edge of the Chesapeake Bay, down on Grays Creek. And I know firsthand just how dirty our water is. We have big issues at the Conwego Dam. We have big issues out on the Eastern Shore. When I was on the board of the Environmental Defense Fund, we specialized with getting bipartisan consensus to move forward on clean water issues, but also, quite frankly, getting states to take the lead in actually working with farmers upstream in other states and offering them incentives because everything they were doing was flowing downstream. And so as governor, you can count on me to make sure that every state that benefits from the Chesapeake Bay is pulled together, that we work with the governors to get agreement on how we're going to keep the bay clean, that we go upstream and we actually have conversations with farmers who are, whose farms are messing up the water as it flows into our state. We offer them incentives. And that we make sure that we move as quickly as possible on these issues. Every time I go past the dam, I worry about what's going to happen when it overflows. It's not a matter of if. We have to move with urgency. We've got to pull our peer leaders of states together, but we also have to be humble enough to recognize that we have to reach out to the farmers and the other grassroots decision makers that are upstream and get them to work with us too.
Mr. Schlackman? I think this is an issue of leadership. I really do. We're just not taking enough leadership in Maryland. And we've got to start where we see enormous problems building. Obviously, the city of Baltimore has a raw sewage problem. The state should have intervened long ago. It's gone up to the federal level, but it's still not being resolved. There's got to be better leadership on this. We've got just about a 2-mile wide dead zone in the Chesapeake Bay right now here in Maryland. Where's the leadership on this? We can't be going around asking other states to clean up their act when we're not even taking the leadership here. And I want to take a minute to point out some of the things going on the Eastern Shore, especially with these chicken farmers. Now, a lot of people say we have to make sure that we're doing things to support the big chicken companies, otherwise they'll leave. If you actually go and see those poor chicken farms, it's disgusting. It's absolutely horrible. And the farmers want out of a lot of these big ag contracts. We're not doing enough in Maryland to support the small farmer, to help them transition to organic farming, to making sure animals are free range, to making sure they're healthy, to making sure there's not runoff going into the bay. We're just not doing enough. And this comes down to a basic sense of leadership. And that's something that I know we are short on in supply here in Maryland. Thank
This next question will be for Ms. Vignaraja, then Mr. Shea, then County Executive Kamenetz. Can we have a vibrant Eastern Shore economy while ensuring that communities and waterways are not negatively affected by large industrial-sized agriculture? What programs do you support to help conventional farmers transition to more sustainable practices? Ms. Vignaraja.
Yeah. I think we absolutely can. And I think sometimes when we talk about the environment and the economy, we get into this false dichotomy and we assume that it is zero-sum, and it's not. A good example of this is working with farmers. We could institute the phosphorus management tool, which is a win-win in the sense that farmers don't have to over-apply phosphorus to their farms, but likewise, we don't have to worry about nutrient and sediment pollution washing into the bay. But this is where, and I want to spend a minute because I do think that the question about clean energy is a critical one. Right now in Maryland, we should be setting incredibly ambitious goals of 100% by 2035, but that's pie in the sky unless we can do it by the end of my administration. So I promise that by 2026, the end of my second term, we will get to 50%. But who here supports the offshore wind industry? Who here supports Maryland being a leader on the offshore wind industry? Who here supports Maryland creating manufacturing, construction, maintenance jobs in offshore wind? Every single candidate behind me has voted for the Clean Energy Jobs Act in a way that would actually cripple offshore wind. Because right now, we are only allowed to have 2.5% of our electricity produced by offshore wind, which means that after the two projects that are already in tow, we wouldn't be allowed to actually create more offshore wind. It is why I didn't actually support the Clean Energy Jobs Act, because I want us to be leading the charge just as New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts can. We can be that leader. We cannot just be producing offshore wind, but we could actually be creating the turbines here. Let us lead here on the Eastern Seaboard.
Mr. Shea.
Let me focus on the question of how to balance the interest of the farmers on the one hand and the environmental concerns, totally legitimate and important concerns on the other. Look, we need both. Agriculture is the largest industry in the state of Maryland. My experience, my whole career has been about gaining ground and making progress on what seem to be intractable problems and conflicts that can't be resolved. This one can be, because ultimately both groups have the same goal, which is a clean environment. The agriculture industry will not thrive if the bay is polluted, our streams are polluted, our air is polluted. It won't work, and they must realize that. So that's part of it. On the other hand, we need to be absolutely sure and steadfast that we protect the interest of the environmental concerns, because it won't work if we don't. What I would do is I'd bring both groups, and I have connections with both groups, I'd bring them into the same area and we would work at it. I know that the instinct of a lot of particularly young leaders is to be demanding, and this is the way it's going to go, and you won't make progress unless you come together and you work it out. I'm here to tell you that's the only way you can make progress, is to bring people together and work it out.
So I believe the question was, what are we going to do on the Eastern Shore, and how do we have a future there that doesn't involve big chicken? I just finished serving a term as the president of the Maryland Association of Counties, and I had a great opportunity to work very closely with the elected local leaders of every county in this state. And you learn about interests that are important to them. One of the board members is a councilman from Wicomico County by the name of Matt Holloway, and he was teaching me about his occupation, hydroponics, in Wicomico County. And he's turned this into a thriving business, and he was impressing me with this highly technical perspective on it. And I said, well, how many generations has your family been in farming? He says, I'm the first one. I graduated from Salisbury University with this major in agricultural science, and I learned about this. This is what we need to be doing in terms of how do we grow new products that don't rely on chicken and allow our Eastern Shore to remain agricultural in its priority. That also means imposing smart growth policies on the shore to prevent the loss of prime and productive soils. This is the future and the past of the shore. Thank you.
Okay. This next question will start with Mr. Ross, then Senator Battolino, then County Executive Baker. What do you see as the largest contributors to Chesapeake Bay pollution, and how do you propose to resolve it?
Well, it starts with runoff from the farms. And this is another case where, once again, we make a little bit of progress with a very good idea, the phosphorus management tool. And then what do? We talk big, but then we don't fully implement it. We don't fully fund it. We make we get progress sort of halfway there. So what I would do is, as governor, and there are champions of this in Annapolis, and they deserve our support on this effort, is we need to fully fund and implement the phosphorus management tool. We need to bring transparency to the emission. We need to bring transparency to what's coming off of these farms, and then use that as a tool where the Maryland Department of Agriculture is not working for the farms, but where they can actually hold them to account. The second thing I think we really need to worry about is what is coming from the Conewengo Dam right now, and it's not just the sediment, but also if you look at a lot of what's happening right now with the fresh water coming in, that is decreasing the salinity of the bay. It's having an extremely negative effect on the oysters and on aquaculture there. So I think that what we need to do is really concentrate on a couple things where the state has unique leverage. For example, in the renegotiation with Exelon on the Conewengo Dam, and making sure that the facilities there are not that the facilities there are such that the sediments are not getting in at the levels that they're projected to. So that's what I think.
Okay.
I think there are three prime sources. Agricultural runoff. We have to be very aggressive about stopping agricultural runoff, but part of that means working with farmers. I've talked to so many of the farmers who have said, look, we have nutrient, we have fertilizer management plans for each one of our farms. And the state isn't reviewing them. The state isn't approving them. We don't know if we're doing it the right way. So we have to make sure that the state government is delivering on its promises and to work with the farmers. The next piece, human waste. Both the waste that comes out of the sewer system and the waste that gets washed into the sewer system and into the runoff system because of poor infrastructure, bad sewage systems that overflow into creeks, that overflow into the stormwater system and get out into the bay. We have to make sure our infrastructure is fixed in that regard. And finally, polluted stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces. We made progress with a stormwater remediation fee that the Republicans, I give them credit, they are bad at public policy and they are great at PR. And they called it, right, the rain tax. And the governor ran against it because we never stood up and defended the rain tax. We haven't defended the things that we've done. And that was a huge mistake because as a result, we're going to have a better, cleaner environment by standing up and doing these smart policies.
Well, I think Rich is absolutely right, which is why I stood up to the rain tax. In Prince George's County, what we did, we went ahead with our program for stormwater remediation, convincing the county that was very skeptical, especially after the election, on why we should do it. But now we have one of the most innovative programs across the nation. It's been recognized by the Obama administration. But the reason we were able to do that is not because we didn't understand, and I believe this is the case, it's not that we don't know what the problem is we don't have the leadership. We don't have the leadership in terms of the governor's office or in terms of the secretary. One of the things that I learned as an executive is you appoint really good, smart people and you allow them to do their job. That's why I appointed Adam Ortiz to create the first Department of Environment. But simply appointing him is not enough. It's being willing to take the message to not only the people, but to the legislative body and do the things we need to do. That is the problem we see in Annapolis now. It's not us understanding what the issues are or what causes Chesapeake Bay to be in trouble. It's having the will and courage from the governor's office, from the secretary's office, to work with the legislature, to push it through, to get the changes we need. You know it and we know it. But as governor, I guarantee you we will get it done. Thank you. Yep.
All right. Now we're going to try something a little different. We've come to the potpourri section of questions. You don't know what you're going to get asked. And we have one question and one responder. So we're just going to, everybody's going to get one crack. Each person, you know what I'm saying? There's only going to be one person answering each question. So we start with a question for Mr. Schlackman. We know that it's crucial to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels and to use more renewable energy, such as solar. In encouraging solar development, do you distinguish among potential locations based on their environmental value? For example, is it okay, in your mind, to cut down a forested area to install a solar facility? Is it okay to build on land designated for agriculture preservation?
This is a fantastic question because there's two really important things to talk about in this question. One is the fact that our current terrible renewable portfolio standards now allows for deforestation biomass, and that's exactly what's happening on the western part of the state. This is a real shame because right now forests are at risk because that counts as renewable energy. I guess I think they could just grow the trees back really quick. I think we know a little better than that. The other part I really, and I want to just say one more thing too. I was proud to be one of the people that stood for the 100% renewable energy portfolio standards, not just the 50% one. Now, I want to take a second to just say, we really need to take leadership on this issue in this state. Because so often I hear, I have a great idea for a solar project, but it's so hard to get it in this county with all these specific county issues. The state should take leadership and just find some standards for what qualifies as a solid solar site, what qualifies for the renewable energy, the renewable portfolio standards. They got to take leadership on this because otherwise it's too difficult. And I can't believe I'm a Green Party candidate. I'm also a socialist saying this. It's difficult for capitalists to come in and put in solar installation sites when they have to go through so many minute little things on the county level. There's got to be accountability, but maybe we have too much in that one particular area because solar is the way of the future along with offshore wind. It's so incredibly important. And I just want to take one more second to say, I watched the beginning of this. Oh, all right, well, I'll take it next time.
All right, next question's for Mr. Jealous. It's a transportation question. There is a constant tension between the need to expand and improve state highway infrastructure, the need for increased attention to public transportation, and a need for creating safe infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists. The transportation sector is now the largest source of climate pollution, and people are calling for more innovative policies to reduce these emissions from motor fuels. So how would you reduce pollution from motor fuels, and how do you propose prioritizing the varying needs of the state within a limited transportation budget?
We've got to invest in what works. We've got to take Larry Hogan's plan for transportation and scrap it. Take our gas tax and actually use it to build out mass transit. We've got to be clear that while it's pretty cool, this idea of a high-speed rail, I saw Black Panther, I think there was one of those in there. It costs $54 round trip and wouldn't make a stop between here and DC. So if you can afford $54 a day to commute, buy a helicopter. You really don't need government subsidy. But in the meantime, we need to invest in actually building out and expanding, modernizing, making more regular, more 24-hour MARC and Metro. We got to focus on smart growth, actually enforcing Plan Maryland, bringing it back, building more vertically, building more live where you work places. And we've got to be serious serious about inclusive, sustainable development in our state while protecting our green areas from, in our ag land from further destruction. Thank you.
This is for Ms. Vignaraja. Many jurisdictions are facing problems of so-called food deserts, which lack access to fresh and healthy food. While it is understood as a problem in low-income urban areas, rural communities often have similar challenges, even those in heavily agricultural areas. So what solutions do you see to overcome this?
And this was an issue that we actually worked on at the White House because Michelle Obama, as part of our Let's Move initiative, probably our most popular and certainly most fun initiative, realized that in so many areas, in Baltimore, in many cities across the state and the country, there are too many situations where the grocery store is literally the convenience store. And so part of what we tried to stress was, one, we need to figure out ways in which we incentivize grocery stores to come in. I was meeting with George Mitchell, who runs the Langston Hughes Center, and they finally were able to bring a grocery store in because we provided the incentives to say, you have a ripe market here, just bring a grocery store in. But part of it is also recognizing that we have incredible opportunities where there is so much fruit and veggie spoilage, where that food literally goes into the trash. And yet our children are starving. And in a state like Maryland, sometimes people are surprised by this fact, but we lack food security. In many parts of our state, 1 in 8 Maryland children go without food. It is why part of my education plan focuses on guaranteeing hot and healthy breakfasts and lunches to our children, because our schools have become community centers of half of the Maryland children who have been in poverty. That has doubled since 1990. And so that's where, for me, it's about trying to figure out those synergies. If we have markets of farmers who are ultimately going to throw that food away, I'm going to bring them into community centers and cities to take advantage of these opportunities.
This is for Mr. Shea. If you're governor, you'll preside over the Maryland Department of the Environment. How will your administration's MD differ from previous ones? And how do you see the role of the state versus local jurisdictions when it comes to matters of environmental protection and public health?
Well, my whole career is based on recruiting great people. I've been lucky enough to do that, and the organizations that I've been part of have thrived. The state government needs to do the same thing. I will recruit great people to the state government, particularly the Department of the Environment. That department will be very good at looking at what regulations are necessary and making sure that they're in place. They'll be very good at enforcing those regulations consistently and persistently. Absolutely has to be done. The Department of the Environment of the state of Maryland needs to take the lead. The federal government has abandoned regulation and enforcement. The local jurisdictions can't do it on their own. The state needs to step in. It needs to have very good people doing it and needs to step in. The governor needs to make sure that happens, and the governor needs to advocate that the federal government get back in the game, because the broader your reach in the environmental world, the better you're going to do to protect the environment. A single state like Maryland can't prevent other states from discharging into streams that come into the bay. The federal government needs to do that. We need to work on regional pacts, but that is very, very difficult. Same goes with respect to local jurisdictions. They need the state to take the overriding lead.
For county executive candidates, we know that low-income communities and communities of color suffer disproportionately from the ill effects of our state's poor air quality, in part because of the concentration of industrial development and related pollution in those areas. So what measures do you think Maryland should take to confront these inequalities?
So that's an interesting question. The reason why smokestacks are where they are is because they're placed in areas where communities did not have political power to fight it. And we are paying the price. Those communities continue to pay the price as a result of frankly, historic racism and not taking the steps necessary to correct those problems. So we have the Bresco plan in downtown Baltimore City, and now it's, they call that clean energy. I don't believe that. We give tax incentives for them to burn, but what they're really doing is harming the health of the people in those communities for generations. So we have to take an affirmative step here to help people, and one of those is watching the impacts of the environment that harms people and creates generations of health hazards and also cycles of poverty. That's been my track record, to look people in the eye, tell them the truth, not judging anyone until you've had a chance to walk in their shoes, and taking the steps that's necessary to do the right thing always. Thank you.
County Executive Baker is next. There are increasing calls to disincentivize and ultimately close waste incineration plants in the state due to the toxicity of the waste ash and their contributions to air pollution and negative health effects of surrounding communities. Do you support these proposals? And if so, what solutions do you have for limiting the amount of waste going into landfills across the state?
First, yes, and I think the way we've done this in the county, we built one of the largest composting facilities there to redistribute the waste going in. It requires the leadership to do that. If we're going to get to 100% clean air, then we have to start addressing these issues up front. And so as governor, I would do that. We've started to do it at the county level. One of the questions, if I can just add on, it said, the role that the state has, should the state take a leading role in the environment, or should it be at the local level? Well, it's really both. Just imagine how much work we could get toward 100% clean air if we work with the state and the local on these issues. That is where we need the leadership of the governor taking place, because the federal government is not going to act. So unless we work together to make sure that we deal with these issues, we're not going to see movement on it. And so what I'd like to see, and what I would do as governor, is make sure they're working together to do that. Thank you.
All right. As I said, these candidates were they were given numbers randomly, strangely. Strangely enough, Senator Madaleno gets a budget question. Maybe the fix is in, I don't know. Anyway, to what extent will you prioritize restoring agency enforcement budgets to ensure compliance with environmental laws and regulations? How would you resolve our structural budget deficit and ensure dedicated funding for environmental enforcement, even in fiscally tight budget years?
The budget is a matter of priorities. It's a matter of having a commitment to put the money in the budget to those services that we need to have. This administration has decided to move away from enforcement, hasn't invested the money in the staff, in the Department of Agriculture, in the Department of the Environment, in the Department of Natural Resources. That has to be a priority. Part of that, too many of those enforcement staff actually are funded by the federal government. If the federal funds go away, that jeopardizes our ability to keep going with the enforcement program. You need a governor who's not only going to fight to get the resources in at the state level, you have to be active in fighting in Congress to make sure that money continues to flow. Now, one of my favorite questions about the structural budget deficit, because I'm sure you're going to hear Larry Hogan moan about the structural budget deficit. Does anyone here know what the structural budget deficit is for the state of Virginia? You know why? No one can raise their hand because they don't have one. You know why? Because they don't have a law that says they're supposed to account for it and report for it. This is a problem we've done to ourselves. We have a state law that says you've got to report every year a 6-year forecast that plans all the spending and all the revenue out. We've created this problem ourselves. I can tell you one thing. I can guarantee you one thing. The structural budget deficit forecast is wrong, Because who knows what the budget is going to be in 5 years and 6 years. And it should not be used to drive the political conversation. And you need a candidate, you need a Democratic nominee who's going to stand up and fight Larry Hogan on these points, because you know it, you've been doing it, and there's no one better engaged on this issue. Thank you.
And for Mr. Ross, we have a political reform question. If elected, you will be redrawing Maryland's legislative and congressional district lines. What process do you support to approach redistricting to encourage the most robust democracy?
Yes. So when I was serving in the Obama administration, if I went to the House of Representatives, I could tell if it was a pre-gerrymandering member of Congress I was testifying in front of, or an after-gerrymandering member of Congress I was talking to. People who came from the pre-gerrymandered districts, they were Democrats who had to talk to Republicans and Republicans who had to talk to Democrats. In the world after gerrymandering, their ears and their minds were closed from the moment you walked in there. If I was a Democrat, they were with me. If it was a Republican, they were against me. And I think it's damaged our democracy. And so what I would seek to do as governor is draw our congressional districts and our legislative districts with a level of integrity that doesn't exist right now. I would seek to do so first by working regionally on the congressional districting. If we can partner with Virginia, if we can partner with Pennsylvania, if we can work with other states to try to harmonize between Democratic and Republican states, since we know we can't do it, Democratic and Republican districts, since we know we can't do it nationally, let's try to do it regionally. If we can't do it regionally, then what I would commit to do in Maryland is doing the right thing and not creating these bizarre districts designed to allow politicians to decide their voters as opposed to voters deciding who their elected officials are going to be.
I've been told that we're doing pretty well for time, so with everyone's indulgence, why don't we allow each of these candidates a minute to sum up, and why don't we go in reverse alphabetical order this time, so we can start with Mrs. Fignaraja. 1 minute.
We've touched on a lot of issues tonight, and very clearly we know that any one of us would be better than Larry Hogan. And yet, the conventional wisdom outside of these halls is that no one can beat Larry Hogan. And they say that, you know, no man can beat Larry Hogan. Well, I'm no man. And the truth is, there is some seriousness to this, because we know he's a formidable candidate. He's crafty. He fakes left, he moves right. And if we recognize what happened in 2014, there were nearly 300,000 Democrats who failed to show up. The majority were women, minorities, immigrants, and younger voters. And so for me, my campaign has not just been about being part of the opposition or the resistance. It's been about setting forth a positive, affirmative agenda of how we can actually see that renaissance of Maryland. If you were happy with the status quo, then I'm probably not your candidate. If you want to blow up the system entirely, then I'm probably not your candidate. But if you fall into that moderate majority who believes that we could actually do something and we could do something real within our lifetimes, I hope you will vote for me. Thank you very much.
This is great. I'm so glad we get this extra minute, because there's two things I have to mention. First of all, there is a tire pyrolysis plant being built right now all the way up in Harford County. It's so important that we get up, marshal our resources, and fight what's going on up there. It's a tire incinerator. This should be a no-brainer for all of us, no matter what organization we're in. And I also want to say we need more bike infrastructure, more public infrastructure. We need to reverse what Larry Hogan did and get the red line money back. That is a civil rights violation. And finally, I just want to say, I watched the beginning of this legislative session, someone, they may even be in this room, who was doing everything right, going hat in hand to Mike and Mike on opening day in a question and answer session, Mike Miller, Mike Bush saying, would you please support the 50% renewable standard? It'll look so good for you to be an environmentalist on our side. They blatantly said no. They blatantly said no in the beginning of the session. That's why I stood up and said we got to go one further and go for the 100% renewable bill. We are the leaders in Annapolis, not the bosses. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me tonight. This has been terrific. I think what you've heard are 8 people in violent agreement with each other. Because these are principles that are solid. They're democratic values that we need to bring to life. That's what we need. We need a party that's united and alive and energetic. Brandon Scott and I can bridge all the gaps of the Democratic Party, whether it's generational, whether it's ideological, whether it's racial. We're very different, but that's our strength. We have the same goals and values, and we're going to bring all of them alive in the election in Maryland. There are 2 important issues. One is you have to nominate somebody who can get things done, and the second is you've got to nominate the person who's most likely to beat Larry Hogan. Look at my record, and look at my plans online. I have comprehensive plans in all the important areas, public education, transportation, etc. And I and Brandon can beat Larry Hogan because we'll battle him for those moderate votes in the middle and all the votes on the right side of the spectrum, left side of the spectrum.
Welcome to the left side of the spectrum.
We cannot retake our country until we retake our state. And it needs to be the case that when you drive into Maryland from Donald Trump's Washington and under something that says, "Welcome to Maryland," you are entering the resistance. We need to be a model for what you can do to combat the evil that is coming out on climate and environment issues out of Donald Trump's Washington. But we also need to set the standard for what we can do, not just as acts of resistance, but modeling what we can do that is truly progressive, that is really forward-leaning, that shows states around the country, hey, we really can get to 100% of renewable clean energy. Look at what Maryland did. If you elect me governor, what I will commit to you is that this will be a place where we will imagine and invent the clean energy future. Thank you all.
Thank you all very much for coming out, and I know many of you are the donors and supporters of the Sierra Club, of the League of Conservation Voters. Thank you for supporting them and having that voice in Annapolis, in our state, in our country to fight. It's so important. If you want a governor who's smart enough to appoint someone like Drew Schmidt-Perkins as the Secretary of the Environment, you want to vote for me. If you want a governor who's smart enough to put Rich Hall back in charge of the Department of Planning, you vote for me. Because I've been there and worked with these people to make progress. Listen, a political pundit named Josh Kurtz, you may know him, called me a one-man truth squad because I was fighting Larry Hogan from his first day in office. I didn't need Donald Trump to get elected to know we were going in the wrong direction. We've been going in the wrong direction since the day Larry Hogan was sworn into office, and I've been fighting to change Maryland back to the way it was and change Maryland for the future. If you want a state that is not open for business, but is open to the future, you want Rich Madaleno and LaWanda Jenkins in office. Thank you very much.
So I'm a lifelong Marylander. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I went to college at Johns Hopkins University. I went to law school down the street. I know this region well. When I was first elected in 1994 to the county council, I was endorsed by the Sierra Club because I told them I would work hard to protect and improve our environment. But so we all pretty much agree on these issues. I want to tell you something about myself. And that's really what's important. Who are we electing? When Donald Trump began his campaign of terror against the immigrant community, starting with a Muslim ban his first week in office, the General Assembly couldn't pass reasonable protections of our immigrant neighbors. I stood up and signed an executive order last April protecting the rights by stating that no county employee will inquire as to someone's immigration status. In December 16, I wrote to the presidents of the 5 colleges making sure that we're protecting DACA students. I renamed Robert E. Lee Park. I signed a bill to protect the rights of transgender individuals. These are values that we stand for. This is who I am. This is the kind of governor I'm going to be. Thank you.
Well, let's hear it for the best bench of candidates to be the next governor of Maryland I've seen in a very long time. And it was nice tonight to reconnect with so many people who were out there together marching to end fracking. Let's hear it for all of us who stood up to ban fracking in our state. But you know what? None of us is going to get the chance to really lead us in doing great things as the governor of the state unless we can turn out voters. We will not beat Larry Hogan with Republican light or tacking to the middle. We will beat Larry Hogan by inspiring the base of the Democratic Party to turn out in force. And my running mate, Susie Turnbull, and I are the only ones up here who have experience in doing just that. In our last elections, me in 2012, I was called the unsung hero of Obama's reelection by Van Jones on CNN because I turned out 1.2 million unlikely voters. And when Susie was chair of the party in 2010, she turned out 125,000 more Democrats than showed up in 2014.
Round of applause. So, no offense to Drew and Rich, who I love very much. They're great. But I think Adam Ortiz, who does our environment, does a great job. He has been a leader around there. My running mate, Elizabeth Embry, right here from Baltimore City, ran for mayor, and I are excited about this race. Making sure, one of the things that was talked about was the red line. The red line coming back to Baltimore City is important. When we fought for the purple line in Prince George's County and Montgomery County, we also fought for the red line. You know, in these challenging times that we have in the state, I'm the one candidate up here who actually has served in the legislature and passed difficult bills, but also run a complex government, the second largest in the state. I'm running for governor not because you do what is easy, but you have to have the courage to do what is right. We need someone who actually understands how to get laws passed. We all agree this is a great, and Ben is right, this is a great group of candidates, the best I've seen. But we have to come together at the end of this election, no matter who gets the nominee, and work together so we can get Larry Hogan out of office.
All right. Thank you, one and all. Before we disperse, I turn things over to the younger, smarter, and handsomer Josh Tolka from the Sierra Club.
Hi, everybody. Take two. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Tolkien. I'm the director of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. I'll be closing this evening tonight. First, a huge thanks to Peabody Heights Brewery for just an amazing venue and for wonderful beer. Thank you. And a reminder again, don't forget to tip the waitstaff. A thanks to LCV and to Maryland Matters and to everybody who helped make this event possible tonight. Thanks to the candidates, all of you for showing up. Special shout out to Senator Cheryl Kagan, the sponsor of our styrofoam ban bill, and all of the other elected officials who are here tonight. I also want to let folks know that we'll be giving the candidates an opportunity to be adding to any of their answers in writing, and we'll be pushing all of that back out. That's really symbolic of the closing point I wanted to make. This is not the end of this conversation. Unlike Earth Day, elevating the issues of the environment is not a single action. This is not the one forum. This needs to be the start of the conversation. And I will challenge everybody here today. The candidates have come out and they've started the conversation with us. It's up to us to continue it, to elevate the issue of the environment, to be constantly asking these questions so they have a chance to answer them. It's a luxury to be here, to get a chance to actually sit with the candidates for governor and to ask them the questions that we want to. Not everybody has this chance. We should value it, we should appreciate it, we should build on it. So please, from this day all the way through the primary and the election, please be active, please register to vote, show up to events, volunteer for your favorite candidate, talk about the environment and public health every chance you get, because we know these issues are affecting people. Not everybody has the chance to bring them up in a forum like this, but we know it is true. We want the environment and public health to be a central part of this election so that whoever gets elected will be more active in ensuring the public health and the protection of Maryland's environment. And we will be there along with this important fight. So thank you all so much for coming. I think some folks will be sticking around, have another beer, and enjoy the ride. Thanks, everybody.